Good morning, everybody. Another beautiful sunrise here in Hawaii. Oh, here comes my cat. She heard my voice. Hi, Gracie. Yeah, pet down. Pet the cat. Well, the other morning I had neighbors over for pancake breakfast. St. Alfonso's pancake breakfast, where I stole the margarine, Frank Zappa. No, yeah, I invited them over because, Gary had said, I really don't know how to cook pancakes, or I've never done it, or, whatever. And I said, well, it's pretty simple, man. Come on by. We'll have pancakes for breakfast. And I did. Yeah, it was good. And we were kind of sitting around there talking. Well, I mentioned that I had just made a great big pot of chicken stock, and I was going to put up a batch of chicken soup. And, if they might come back later for dinner or something, or the next day and have soup, they're welcome. Because quite a bit. Well, Gary had said, well, he says, I never make soup. Now, I know they've been by to eat my soup before, so they eat soup, okay? But, no, he says they never make soup. He says, I usually buy mine in cans, and I looked at him and I went, oh, my goodness. Yeah, when was the last time Bill was in a store pricing soups? Yeah, because I grew up in the American convenience kitchen, and we knew how to use a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup to make a green bean casserole. Yeah, right. With little crunchy onion things on top. Or, I just used to use Campbell's tomato soup as the tomato sauce base, sometimes like in Galumkis or whatever. My grandma did that. I grew up that way. And, that was back in the days when a can of Campbell's soup, 15 to 35 cents, they were cheap. They really didn't cost a lot of money. Although last time I got the idea that, I think I'm going to make one of them classic green bean casseroles. I had a whole lot of green beans in the garden. And so I went out to get myself a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. And right now I cannot remember the exact price. Okay, I can't remember the exact price, but it floored me. I could not believe what had happened to canned soups. They had become expensive. This used to be cheap food. Yes. I mean, I remember surviving on chicken noodle out of a Campbell's can because you could afford to do that. I guess ramen has replaced Campbell's soup or something for college kids now. Anyhow, I just couldn't believe it. Buying canned soup is incredibly expensive. I saw a little bit in the news this morning again. Go ahead, beat on me. Bill was looking at the media, evil media. Claim is some survey someone did claim 67% of Americans claim they are currently underwater, not making enough money in the paychecks due to inflation and whatnot to pay their bills. There you have it. We have economic issues all over. I'm not an economist. I'm a gardener, farmer, but you could probably take my word for the fact that that ain't going away anytime soon. And I don't care who's in office. The more they blow hot air in Washington and get nothing done, well, the less help we may get on the situation. But there's no one out there that actually has the ability to really fix it. These things are kind of organic, and it's going to have to grow its way back into economic health. And as you all know, prices on anything really seldom ever go down. When I started driving, I was paying 25 cents a gallon for gasoline. It's been like that, and it's not coming down. I go on like that. Remember the nickel Snickers bar? Remember the nickel candy bar? Oh my goodness, yeah. Nothing ever comes down, so get used to it. I guess all that ever happens is we have inflation and the wages go up. So get used to poverty temporarily. Live with it. I had at least an interlude in my life. where I had this experience. After a divorce, I ended up landing at my grandparents' home, and well, my grandpa he had a pretty good job. I mean, this is union truck body man in Chicago, welded broken trucks, and the pay's all right. He didn't have much for living expenses, but well, in their minds, they were still living in the Depression, and it was hard on them. The Depression was really pretty hard on those folks, and they were still there. And then, my maternal grandmother, she had been raised on a Indiana homestead in the northern part where it's all sand, and so this is a poor homestead with a cluster of sisters that I can't even think right now how many. Great big sister family, and my great grandma. They used to churn butter. Yeah, she'd complain bitterly when the cows got into the wild onions. I thought I was having garlic bread for breakfast, but it turned out it was just the onions had gotten into the milk again. Great grandpa, he smoked his hams and bacon. They raised pigs and all that. They were real homesteaders. Great grandma claimed his secret ingredient to smoking ham was a piece of tar paper. I think he actually used that to get the fire started. I remember he had a Model A Ford pickup they drove, and the radiator leaked so bad he used to dump oatmeal in it. Grandma would always complain, "He's taking my oatmeal again," and then because the oatmeal would swell up and plug the holes in the radiator in the old Ford. So they weren't rich, and Grandma, she grew up in that sort of a background, and then the Depression hit, and then of course my grandpa, He'd taken off from Europe during World War I and wandered as far away as Mongolia and Turkey, and finally made his way over here. They used to tell stories about being so hungry they would boil tree bark, okay? Whenever somebody didn't want to eat anything at the kitchen table because they didn't like the taste of it. So it was this sort of an environment. Well, Grandma, she made soup. And soup is the intelligence of poverty. I kind of thought maybe I'd try some Googling this morning and see, what is the evolution of soup? But sitting there in the dark, I decided, everybody knew how to make soup everywhere. I mean, obviously, it's such an obvious thing. Shortly after we discovered fire, we discovered soup. Boiling anything, including a stone, if you're that poor, in water yields soup, one kind or another. Well, I remember my grandma, she used to actually go to the butcher and shop soup bones. I guess you could still get that stuff. I don't know. But she'd make red beet borscht, which I despised, and used beef soup bones to make it. She made pretty good chicken soup. And it was usually made from the parts and things from the chicken, the skins, the leftovers, the back, the neck, that kind of stuff. Never, ever, ever would you ever see my grandmother take a chicken breast or a drumstick and boil it down for soup. She might boil down the bones left from the breast after cooking a chicken. That would happen. But by and large, for the most part, soups tended to start with waste. And they'd move upward. Maybe you'd add onions, you'd add carrots and so on to this. If you had enough money to add onions and carrots, potatoes, noodles, Grandma used to cut big, thick klushki shell egg noodles to put in the chicken soup. She'd make those herself. They weren't bad. Unlike much of her cooking, it was soft enough to chew the noodles. So here I am, growing up in this here tradition, people that churn their own butter and people that boil down all the bones to make something else for dinner. Well, I kind of grew up thinking that was natural, and I'm sure I've got plenty of people out there listening to this channel that do make soup, right? Yeah, as I said, you can make it out of almost anything. So, but then again, I find there are a whole lot of people who have never made soup. And I found there's a lot of people that have almost no experience with other people's homemade soup, because I invite folks to have soup with me frequently. I make soup, every couple of weeks probably or so. I don't know how often, but it's frequent. We have soup several times a month. In my case, I'll be taking a whole chicken, and I'll cut that chicken all up, and I'll take the pieces that we really like to eat for one application or another, and I'll separate them. But then there's the rest of it. I don't really care to eat the backs much. They're all right. And there's 2 pieces in the rear there that great-grandpa used to call the oysters that are pretty good. But there ain't much on the back. There's a lot of soup in the back, though. Yeah, when you boil one, you get a lot of flavor out of that thing. And so I save all that stuff. Put it in the freezer. I accumulate it, and then when I get enough of it, I had so much of it, I had to use a really big pot, and I cooked down all my chicken parts and things. You can make soup from strictly vegetable, soup made from strictly mushrooms. I grew up in the tradition at my grandmother's house of you starting with a bone. Yeah, when we're making soup, always start with a bone. It could have been a ham bone, could have been a beef bone, didn't matter. You start with a bone or a pile of bones and start cooking. But many years later, I met Ellen, and Ellen was a vegetarian. Well, I've been making soup my whole life, and now I got to figure out, how do I make soup without bones? Okay, so I started making soup without bones. Yeah, it was easy. There are a lot of vegetable bouillon type cubes out there that will help you get things kind of started. Some of them was made in Switzerland are pretty good. I remember using those, but really, if you just saute onions in a pan, for instance, you have something there already from the caramelization that can begin to make soup. Basic ingredients in soup: minimum water, salt. I'm sorry, and it's not good for blood pressure, but soup without salt, water and salt are the basic ingredients, and the salt will actually help draw flavors and things out of stuff. So ordinarily when making soup, you start off with whatever it is you had, and you throw it into a pot, and if it's raw, well, you brown it first, give it a little brown. That always makes better flavor. And then once it's browned, you add water to the pot, add some salt to the pot, and you just start boiling. Cook it long and slow. After it's been on for a few hours, like if you're doing chicken bones or something, take it, strain it out, put the stock away in the fridge, and let it solidify. The fat will rise to the top, harden, and you'll be able to lift it off. Now, there are separation funnels. There are a variety of different tools and gadgets for doing this. I use a pancake turner. I just take the pancake turner, slide it right under the layers of fat, and flip the stuff off. It works quite well. I put a stack of old newspapers right next to the bowl and just do this. I recall, after moving out of the house, so to speak, and out there on my own as a young man, I had a place in Phoenix that I'd rented, the big old place, and I used to rent rooms in it to other snowbirds who'd come down from the north in the winter, and so on. And so I had a lot of crazy people hanging all around the house all the time. And so, people buy this or they'd buy that or whatever, and they'd put it into the refrigerator. Well, every week, once a week, my job, icebox I'd go through the refrigerator and try to decide, okay, that's a half a cheeseburger. It's been there for 6 days. It's in the can. Okay. But go through and try to decide, well, what do we have here that, maybe it's getting slightly on the edge. The celery is getting a little limp, because it wasn't wrapped right or whatever. Or I ate part of this, but I didn't finish, or, that type of thing. Can it be used in soup? That's what I tell myself. And so if it was possible to use it in soup, I'd go through and I'd clean the refrigerator once every week, and I would make a big pot of soup. And I'd put it out on the table and invite everybody in to have a bowl. And, well, I never heard any protests. No, people used to sit down to that and go, wow, homemade soup? Hey, wow, this is good, Bill. What do you put in here? And I'd say, oh, this, that, and the other thing. And then I'd watch a guy across the table who reached in the bowl and picked up this kind of gray, brown thing, sitting there looking at it on a spoon. He says, what is this? Well, I had a can of smoked oysters the other day there, and I ate half of them. That's a smoked oyster. I threw the rest in the soup. And, I ate oysters. He never ate my soup again. It's a mindset. Smoked oysters actually add a really nice bouquet to soup. Yeah, I'd put anything in there that made sense. I'd try to poison anybody or do something stupid. I'm a fairly good cook. I'd match things up, but I'd be surprised what you can stir together in a pot of soup. Yeah. So, the intelligence of poverty. 67% of Americans saying the paycheck ain't coming end to end. When was the last time you made soup out of some chicken bones? As soon as she heard me start up with the camera, hey, come running around the corner. She just wants to be here. I'm not exactly sure whether Gracie knows she's a famous video cat or not. People from Maryland come by yesterday, and Gracie come around the corner, and the lady goes, oh, it's Gracie. I don't know if she realizes that everybody seems to know who she is. Well, aloha, folks. Eat more soup.